Welcome everyone to our appointment to the offer webinar. Tonight, we're going to be discussing some things to keep in mind. Some of you have asked me to provide some training on, okay, now I have a buyer, now I'm taking them out on appointments. Now how do I get them to actually commit to actually writing the offer? And there are some objections and there are some things we need to kind of consider. So tonight, my hope is to give you some tips and tricks. Some of you may be old dogs. I'm going to teach you new things, maybe not. But nonetheless, I think it's a good topic for the hour. So actually, it's not an hour. We're only going to cover 30 minutes. But if you have other questions, sometimes I do go over 6. If you are on for your first time, if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to put something in the chat as I'm talking. But I do talk very fast and I will cover a lot of content in a very short amount of time. So pop it in the chat if you have questions. We will open up the chat window and maybe respond and also comment at the very end of the presentation. So thank you, Shannon. I think for new agents, it's kind of a lot when you look at how working with buyers. You think, oh, I got my license. This business should be no problem. I'll just go and get myself an offer written. There's a lot of steps that go into it. So I've broken out the steps into 4 segments, and I've talked with a lot of new agents as I've recruited you on these 4 different. In fact, some of you I actually interviewed you and screened you to make sure that you had your own, leads and you had your own knowledge of the locations that we're going to talk about. But many of you struggle with how to get them committed to writing an offer. And there really has been no training unless you've maybe done some other sales training in your past or similar fields like real estate. Then this third segment of working with the buyer would be, now you've written the offer, now we get it accepted and it goes into a contract status. And we do a lot of training on that in person and in class. The 4th segment would be, now you've got it in contract, but now we've got to close it. And we also do a lot of training on that. So the second segment, I looked at our past recordings and I looked at what we've taught in class, and we really have not done a lot of training in number 2. So I'm going to spend the time today in going over, you got appointments, what are some key top strategies we can discuss, and how you get that client to actually write an offer. Let's go to the next slide. So the first thing I would say is, if you're new or you have never done a real estate sale before, you've got to know your product. I love Dylan Chalk. He does a fabulous training. He's actually a clock hour instructor as well. So if you want to look him up, Dylan Chalk, he has classes. If you have an opportunity to take one of his classes, you'll probably get this cheat sheet in class. But I would take the class again. In fact, I've taken it maybe 2 or 3 times in my career, just so I could be reminded and see if there's anything that's changed on this home system timeline cheat sheet. I love the cheat sheet. It kind of gives me some knowledge about the properties of like what to be concerned about in the 1920s versus the 1970s. He has it listed in plumbing, interior, exterior. I love the way he kind of outlines this for a new agent that needs to understand the product. So if you're feeling like, I don't know what, earthquake, when the earthquake hit Seattle and how that kind of created cracks in the foundation, or maybe I want to know what asbestos, shingles, when they started doing those types of things in the exterior, or things to kind of keep in mind, maybe to, write those things down and maybe learn more about the product as you tour properties. I loved his little cheat sheet. If you need a copy of it, I can send it to you. But certainly give him a call if you have an inspection or you want to go sit through an inspection. He does a very thorough job of his inspections. His phone number and his information is there. He's more in King County and a little bit in Snohomish, but certainly he would go on the appointments as well if you had a pretty significant project that he could give inspection advice on. Let's go to the next one. Talking about that, know your product. You also, if you're a new agent, if you've got a key to go look at properties, what you may want to do is go ahead and get yourself out there in looking at product. You have to follow the instructions, the agent remarks, making the showing time requests. You can definitely preview, but that's how you know your product, is by going out and making it a goal that you actually are touring properties on a week-to-week basis. Once you start to know your product, then you're able to share that product knowledge with your clients and actually have more confidence in what you're saying. So I think that's the first thing I will say is know your product. The second thing would be now you've got people that maybe want to go out and look at things. Let's go to the next slide, Shannon. Sorry. We want to set expectations. I think new agents make this mistake a lot. And what they end up doing is just getting in the car and going out and showing whatever properties that the client wants them to see. And that's the wrong approach to have. So I've created this home visit scoring sheet that's very helpful. And I use this a lot with my new agents when they were being mentored by me. And it's kind of done on visit 1 on the top of the grid. It's where you start. That's the address goes in that box is where you're going to start. Hopefully you're starting at the office or at a neutral place where you can really sit down and go over your consultation, explain what properties you're going to go tour, get their signature on the buyer service agreement, buyer agency agreement, depending on what state you live in, and go ahead and get that done on visit number 1. That box should be that address, and that top box should be that place or location you're meaning to go over. But the little boxes that you kind of go down the column there, you should be only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the most, 7 different properties at your first appointment that you're going to look at. I have made mistakes in my past of showing way too many homes. And then the client was like, what? I can't remember what house we saw what, or when we saw, there's that house, I can't remember much about it. And it gets too cluttered. And so when you're going on appointments, I never schedule more than 7 on that first, that first appointment or that first visit. If we go on the next visit, then you hopefully, if you're doing a good job with your client and narrowing things down, it becomes less and less. And new agents sometimes takes 5 times going out with a client to actually identify and isolate it down to maybe their top 2 or their 1 or 2. So here's how I would use this. It's a waterfall strategy. So if I was going to meet with a client today, say Shannon was my buyer, I'd say, Shannon, so here's how I work. After obviously I've asked a lot of questions and got their signature on the service agreement, and we're committed to working with each other. So here's how I will work. I've set up the appointments to go out and look, and you can use the waterfall chart if it's helpful to kind of visualize what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But my waterfall chart, because I've been doing this a long time and I know the area, we don't go out more than 3 times. In fact, the first time we go out, we're going to look at several. In fact, let's just use an example. I scheduled 5 for us to go out and look at. But most of the time, we don't find what we're looking for on the first time. Sometimes we get lucky, but most of the time we don't find what we're looking for. And we go out a second time to really look at some other things. Maybe we pick a different time, right? We go in the evening versus the afternoon, or we go on a weekend versus a work day. But we kind of look at that property in a different light at a different time. So after our first appointment, we'll talk about each property. By the second time, we'll isolate which ones you like the best. And then by the third one, usually by the third one, my clients are writing an offer. And I set that expectation in my consultation. I can't emphasize that enough. I started doing that when we had difficulty getting clients committed to writing an offer. They just kept wanting to go look at more and more and more. And by setting expectations and explaining to them, here's how I typically work, all of a sudden, when we have to go out the 4th time, they're the ones telling me, Rachelle, I thought we only had to go out like 3 times. And I'm like, for you, I'm doing a special one, right? But they will actually stay committed if you do it right. If you actually set expectations and kind of lay out the plan, if you will, you control that. And you do need to control the narrative. If you do not, then you're going to be going out 4 times, 5 times, and hopefully not 6 or 7 times in order to find them the offer or the home that they want to offer on. Go to the next slide. So once you kind of get them to that point, we're actually looking at homes, then I have a lot of fun. I guess it's not very fun because I cringe, actually. I cringe because some people say the wrong thing. And they don't know that they're doing it. So if I was to coach somebody on the close-ended questions, oftentimes the agents are using close-ended questions when they're showing properties. And so by just making some slight tweaks to the questions here on the close-ended questions, and turning them into open-ended questions, you will start to see a difference in how you actually are getting the client to move from looking at properties to actually writing offers by making that conscious choice to kind of make those changes. So I hear this often used during the appointment. I hear people on the phone. In fact, I heard somebody just today in the office say, "Are you pre-approved?" Okay, and so that's kind of a close-ended question, and it doesn't move the ball forward. We're wanting to keep the dialogue very open so that we can have conversation about their process and help lead them through getting them to commit to actually one property. So use sentences that start with the what, the when, the why, the where, the how, or you can simply, if you're not accustomed to doing those types of open-ended questions, you may want to say, you know, tell me more about living in this space. Instead of say, can you see yourself living here? That's very close-ended. It's like usually a yes or no answer. It stops the conversation, doesn't keep it open. I could change that question by saying, can you see yourself living here, to, you know, tell me more about, you know, your family living in this space. And you can just say it very softly and they will respond, and that will help you in knowing whether this might be the right property for them. Can you see yourself living here? No. I mean, that's, now we're going to the next property. So there might be some more things that you can get from that open-ended questioning when you're in the properties. Would you be upset if someone else purchased this home? Again, that's a closed-ended question that can be used as a closing question. But when we're starting to look at homes, that's probably improperly placed in the wrong part of the process. And the same thing, are you paying cash or financing through a lender? Are you would be no. That kind of close-ended question could use some work. Do you like the neighborhood? That's a yes or no answer. Instead, you say, what do you like about this neighborhood? Do you see how the difference could be? Well, I like that the neighbors are, you know, so close. That gives me security and knowing that there's always somebody that's kind of watching over my house. So then you can, with that example, you kind of know that they're interested in security, or that they like having the properties close to each other. So do you like the neighborhood is a yes or no. I wouldn't actually know that information about security that would be important to them. So I guess that's kind of the idea behind using more open-ended questions when you're starting to really nurture that a client through the process, especially when you're showing homes. Let's go to the next slide. So there are some other questions that I like to use to get prepared. What do you feel is your most negotiable factor? So that's kind of, you know, an interesting thought. It's like, okay, we're kind of starting to ask questions about, now that I've asked some questions, whether they like the neighborhood, whether this, and they've given me no objections. You can almost tell when somebody walks into the property, this is going to be the one. You kind of can see the body language. You can observe how they kind of tour the property, how long they stay in the property. Those are some of the things that makes you get to that point where you can ask some of these questions. What do you feel is the most negotiable factor? And they will say, you know what, that we're paying cash, or that we're willing to, you know, play the back and forth game and do the multiple offer game, because clearly there's a lot of business cards here and we waited our turn to go look at the property. So you can ask them questions about that. How much are you willing to pay? So that is less of an open-ended question. It is open, you know, it's a how question. Doesn't say, are you willing to pay X for this home? That's not the question we're asking, is how much are you willing to pay? So they can give you kind of a starting point. You know, we're willing to pay $650,000 for this house, Rachelle. How prepared are you to go up if there's multiple offers? So you want to kind of tease them with the questions that you're asking at this stage in the game. How comfortable are you with the condition of the property? Based on what we've seen so far, how comfortable are you with the condition of the property? I use that a lot. And what do you hope the final outcome of this offer will be? And that's, keep that very open and let them have a very strong dialogue with you so you can gauge how serious they are about the process. They might not be as serious and they may want to keep looking, but you can start to tease them with some of these questions. Again, they're open-ended questions and they should be used before we actually put the offer together. Let's go to the next slide. So then at some point, these are trial, I used to have a sheet in the office and I've had the sheet for over 15 years. And it said trial closes, and literally these are all of the trial closes that I've used in my career. Some of them you might probably go, that was a Tom Ferry or a Mike Ferry trial close that you see here on the screen. But these are the trial closes that I've used in my career. And again, 15 years, this is probably one of the most asked for sheets that I have in the office tucked in my drawer. So I thought, you know what, we should probably go through trial closes. The trial close works by putting the idea in the client's mind that we're moving forward. And the response will usually tell you, and it will tell them that they're ready for the next step. They're ready to put an offer together on this particular property. So questions would be, how do you like this place? And you'll notice that some of these are similar to the open-ended questions, but you'll start to see some of them may have kind of a close. Do you think this room is large enough for your office? That's a close-ended question, but it's a question that can be used to kind of gauge a trial close and whether they want to go ahead and move forward. That this, that office was important to them. You listened to their, as you've toured the properties, and you're just kind of prompting that trial close to say, do you think this room is large enough for the office? And then you pause and you let them answer. If they say yes, you want to also follow it up with another question. So that's the one thing with trial closes. You can kind of let them land, but you have to land well, and they have to be used in the proper timing. And some people use trial closes way too early on in the process, and then they end up pissing off their buyer. So you got to be very careful when you use the trial closes, but these are all trial closes that I've used at some point or another in my career. Let's go to the next slide.
Do you have a favorite one?
Do I have a favorite one?
Like just a go-to, your knee-jerk trial close.
It really is based on how the showings. I mean, there's how do you like this place in comparison to the others we've toured, I think is my go-to. I do like to compare because they can sometimes, say things that I didn't pick up. But you notice that they're all kind of related to various situations. What features do you like about this one over the other homes? That's a really good kind of comparison. I like that one. If we were to close, that one's if I've used it, but it takes a bit of skill. If we were to close by the end of the month, how would that fit in your time frame? That's a pretty bold one to use, but I have used it. And you have to have built a ton of rapport, and you have to know your client really well. But I have trial closed with that as well. So does that answer your question, Eric? I'll give you a few. Okay.
Absolutely. I love trial closing. So yeah, that helps.
Awesome. So then you're going to get objections. This happens all the time. In real estate, we hear more objections than I have room or a slide for. But these are common objections if they aren't willing to fix the items on the sheet, or they're not willing to do, I just looked at the pre-inspection, Rachelle, and I don't think the sellers are willing to fix any of these things. I don't know if I want to buy it. I mean, I've heard that, in fact, I heard that last weekend. If they aren't willing to fix the items in the sheet, I don't know if I want to buy it. You have to be able to listen to the objection, hear them out, and then propose or ask another question. So really, an objection is an opportunity to ask another question. So you pause after somebody says, I don't like that they've, they're not going to fix anything on the sheet. They have the pre-inspection uploaded on, and I know there's all of this interest in the property. I just don't know if this is the right one. I don't think I want to buy it. I could listen. I said, oh, I can understand how that is concerning to you, and that you don't want to rush into something. But let me get some more information. What are the items on the sheet that are most concerning to you? Again, I just turn that into another question, and then that gives me some time to hear them out, shows me that I'm listening to them. And then I may have to call the listing agent and find out, a little bit more about those items on the sheet or the items that were on the pre-inspection, and then maybe propose an alternative if it's something that we can do, or a home warranty maybe covers that. There are ways sometimes in handling a simple objection as a repair item that's on a list. They will see you as a leader if you're able to propose a possible solution to overcome that objection. But you first have to listen, and you do have to ask another question to fully understand whether that really is a true objection or whether it's just a smoke screen, where they're nervous. In that case, last weekend, they were just nervous. And they needed some guidance on how to unpack that listing or that pre-inspection that they're looking at. Another one that we hear a lot, I researched the demographics of the area. I'm not sure this is the type of area that we want to be in. Be very careful with that, because again, we cannot discriminate, and we cannot, we have fair housing rules that we have to adhere to, so we cannot do anything like that. So what you can do is provide them with the demographics. You could ask them more questions about the demographics. This would be the question I would ask. Where did you see the demographics? Some people will say, oh, it just was driving by. Again, that's not true, a true indicator of what the demographics are in a particular area. So you might want to get them some more information from our local statistics or from our title office that allows them to get more information about a particular area, about pricing, about the schools and things of that nature, to help them, guide them in the right direction. I lost my job. That's a tough one. That is an objection that sometimes I can't even overcome. That's unfortunate. And that usually will mean we will have to resume the search unless they have some way of having somebody else buy the home for them, or right to purchase and sale. There might be some opportunity there. But if they lost their job, unfortunately, unless they have cash, that will be a difficult objection to overcome, but certainly not something that I have not overcome by asking more questions. So the whole idea here on these objections is to formulate another question. So when I was being coached by a very expensive coach, I will say that it was very simple. All she had me do was take the top 10 objections that I was hearing from my buyers, and she goes, go get some index cards, go back to the old days. And then on one side of the index card, write the objection that you hear from your buyer. And then on the other side, then you need to come up with a response, and you need to practice that. And you need to practice that objection handling until you get so good at it that it just rolls off your tongue. So, if some of these are ones that you hear all the time, what you'll find is that these are true objections most of the time. But really, the objections that many of you are hearing, like I'm just browsing, or I'm just kind of getting my feet wet, those are objections that are smoke screens that really need to be practiced on how you're going to respond to those objections, rather than you just winging it. I think too many of you wing it, and you need to be more thoughtful in your processes. These are true objections. I want to move into the home later than originally planned, or I want to move into the home sooner than planned. These are true objections where it takes more dialogue to get that objection handled, and it takes a true professional to weave that conversation together with more open-ended questions and then close-ended questions in order to get them committed to actually put pen to paper. The whole goal here is, if they say, you know what, I want to offer an obscene amount of money. Somebody who said, I want to offer like 30% below the asking price, and there's multiple offers. Sometimes you have to handle that objection carefully, because you don't want to upset that buyer, and you have to understand their reasoning or why they're asking for 30 or 40% off of the offer. And by guiding them through that process of asking more questions, what you'll end up finding out is they may still want to go ahead and put the offer in, but you've already got them committed because you've listened to them and provided them with some thoughts or things to consider to handle that objection. But in the end, together, just you might have to couch it differently with the listing agent. Certainly keeping in mind that we're moving them forward in the process, and sometimes that is the best place to be, is getting them to put pen to paper, writing an offer, and getting them committed to the actual writing process. It will also help you, because if they don't get that one, they'll probably be out looking for another property, and then they will be able to reflect on that process and how you helped them and how you handled their objection with that first one. I think that's it. Shannon.
We had a lot of questions about some of the content. There's a lot of content on here. I think it would be helpful for some of you. I'm going to go back to the objections that are probably the big ones when we're getting buyers, so that we can kind of run through some scenarios. So here, let me kind of squeeze back here for a second so you guys can see those. So the questions that come up during an appointment when you're working with a buyer, and it's either they're on the phone and you're trying to get them to schedule the appointment that they're gonna go see, or you're at the house with them. These are probably the number one questions that will come up and that you'll want to ask, but in a better way. So Rachelle, I'm hoping we can kind of go down them one more time.
Okay, we'll go
Just
through
question by
it
question,
slower.
kind of run through what not to do and then what to
So
do.
close-ended
instead.
question, do you like the neighborhood? Yeah, I hear a lot of people say, do you like the neighborhood? And they're like, yeah, let's go. Or no.
Do you want to be in Bellevue? Instead of saying something like that, what can we say instead of saying, do you want to be in Bellevue? Do you want to be in Kirkland? What can we say instead?
So what neighborhoods do you like the best?
Okay. And then
What is important about the neighborhood to you in your home search?
oh, I want to be close to my job, which I live in, or
Yeah.
I work in downtown Bellevue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you get to more, so by opening it up, not just a yes or no, you're gonna get more than just do you like the Bellevue area?
Right. And then are you paying cash or financing through a lender? And instead of saying something like that, we can be saying,
Who will be working with you on your financing?
and then would you be upset if someone else purchased a house? So I'm asking a client if they'd be upset, someone else is gonna purchase this house.
That's okay.
Is that good? Is that bad? How can I do it better?
And I hear that a lot because there's multiple offers, right? Would you be upset if somebody else got this one? Again, it's closed-ended. So instead of changing that, we need to change it to a what, when, why, or how. What would happen if somebody was to get this one over you? What things would have to change?
And then are you ready to move? And this is one that comes up a lot. So some people say, are you ready to go? I think the number one thing that you can ask as an agent, and I use this one all the time, it's instead of saying, are you ready to move, just say, what is your time frame?
Yep.
Like that's the number one thing that you can have in your little back pocket. What's your time frame for purchasing a house? Do you have a lease? Are you leasing right now? Kind of
Time frame is take that, are you ready to move? What would have to happen, or what's your time frame like? That's a much better question.
yeah.
Can you see yourself living here? That would be a closing question. That would be a trial close. That would be in that list. So instead of saying, can you see yourself living here, is what do you like most about the living room? What do you like? What do you like about the interior? What do you like about the exterior? So it's asking more open-ended questions like that. Instead of saying, can you see yourself living here?
Well, and you can get real specific too. If you know the client, so I had one recently where they have a big husky and they have a big old crate and they're all concerned about where they're going to put the dog, in the house when they're at work. And so instead of saying, can you see yourself living here? Be specific in some cases to their scenario. Where do you see, little Fido's crate going? Oh, I'd probably put it over here. Oh, I'd put it over there. And then they can kind of start visualizing what would work.
Do you want to write an offer on this home? So what do you think about this property? How does this compare to the other one we saw? That would be how I would phrase that differently. Instead of just being so close-ended on this. I mean, you certainly, if you're on the waterfall and you're like on showing number 5 and we're down to 1 or 2, that might be appropriate to ask that question, but not early on when you're out there touring 5 or 6 different properties. You might want to say, what do you think about this property as far as, would this be a contender? What do you like about this property? And would this be the type of property that you can see yourself making an offer on? I don't like the way it's just so stark. Do you want to write offers? Like, no.
Yeah.
Are you going to devote significant time to your search? How much time do you have this week to commit to your home search? So I just changed that right from, are you going to devote a significant time to your search? It doesn't land well as well.
What is your schedule like?
What is your schedule like for looking at properties this week?
Yeah.
That would be how we change that one. Did you like the area?
That's kind of like neighborhood, I would say, where it's like, how did you feel about the neighborhood? Oh, I like planned communities. I want to have sidewalks. It's a safety thing for me.
Yeah.
That's where you can kind of get some more information rather than, no, I don't like the area. That
see.
doesn't help you narrow stuff down.
Have you been pre-approved is definitely not something that I want to hear you guys say early in the process.
Yeah.
Of course, it's important. We all know it's important, but you want to ask it in a different way. Is your time frame for moving set? That's again a close-ended question. We need to change that to open.
What are your moving plans?
What are
would
your
be a
moving
good
plans?
one to ask instead. Yeah.
So hopefully you jotted down some notes. That was a lot better on that slide. Thank you,
Yep.
Shannon.
Yeah, and that'll get you guys to the point where people like to talk, buyers like to talk, and they want to feel comfortable with you. You know, how can we prove value, especially with buyer brokerage services agreements that we're having to now introduce this year? How can we improve our value? How can we be that advisor, that doctor that's taking notes in the chart for them, right? And we do that by asking the right questions. So I think these are ones that will make them have that rapport. So especially if you're meeting with someone that you've never met before, this is a referral, if this is an internet lead, I mean, however this person is coming to you, these types of questions will A, establish you as a professional, but then B, also build a lot of rapport. Like, she listened to me. They heard what was important to me, you know, rather than, you know, this other agent from this other company that literally just opened the door.
Yep.
So we want to have that value. We want to take kind of the true client and professional approach to it. And it's not hard. I mean, these are simple, small little tweaks that you can make that will make a big difference. And I think we had a couple other questions about like, where can I get the content for this? We're going to work on getting these on our website, so you guys can snag the visuals for these another time if you're wanting to actually practice and work through some of these. But the trial closes is one that I know Rachelle uses a lot, and it is really helpful. I think when I was first going through these, this is where we learn. You learn by practicing. So, you know, if use someone that you live with, use your kids, use your family member, whomever, and kind of practice this out. If you're pre-going homes with someone, go with a friend. Say, hey, can I test out, you know, some scenarios with you? You know, this is where you can kind of practice some of these things. And I think it kind of going back to the whole client approach and building more rapport and you know, setting yourself up for success is, it has it on here on the slide. It says, when a client asks a question, never answer the question with just a yes or no. You know, so if they say, you know, what do you think about this? Or how, you know, do you like this? Or would you put that there? Instead of just saying yes, and then just leaving it at that, it following up with yet another question. You know, your brain will work as fast as it will work, you know, but having kind of other kind of questions that you want to know about that person might be helpful to kind of fill in the gaps. What do you think about the kid? You know, what would the kids say? You know, maybe something like that. Or what do you think how this would work here in this scenario? Would you put the sofa here? You know, where and how does the condition look? Is our carpets a concern? I know I had one buyer who he hated hardwoods. He's one of those people who hated hardwoods. Like in our industry, especially right now with the way the trends are, we like hardwoods and we like vinyl, we like old tile and all that stuff. But for him, it was a big deal having a carpet in a house. So how would I have known that if I was like, how do we feel about the pads of the carpet? And he's like, no, I hate it. I wouldn't have known that had I not asked. So ask lots of questions. There's not really a dumb question I'd say that's out there, especially if you're trying to get to know them a little bit more too.
So we'll go ahead and put the trial closes up, and then we will also put Dylan's house like tips, his cheat sheet. I think those two things will be huge.
Yeah, I'll go
And then
back to it so you guys can see it.
And then if you want to listen to the recording, we'll record this. So and post it on our website so you can listen to it later.
Yeah, and these product things, I'll echo Rachelle. I've taken Dylan Chalk's classes before. You know, if you listen to some of those top agents, they know houses, they know how they're built, they know how they're constructed. Even if we're not builders, we kind of have an idea. Certain ages of homes are problematic in certain areas. And this is actually really helpful. I took Dylan's class too, and he goes very much in detail, even more so than what this sheet is. But it's like knowing that, you know, we have lead and asbestos in the 70s. You know, we've got some of these, what is the other thing that's been coming up a lot? It's the recalled electrical panels. I mean, there's certain areas of time where certain things are problematic, and it's good to know about those ahead of time.
Okay, well, it's a wrap. Any questions that we had, Candace, that came into you? Nope, all good. Appreciate the comments that came in. That's great. You guys are and yeah, 1099s are in the mail. They've also been emailed as well. So I don't know if you didn't get it, you probably want to send an email to accounting@bestchoicerealtywa.com.
Yeah,
And
I did get a few people that asked for the cheat sheet, the inspector sheet. Yeah.
okay, that cheat sheet's fun.
Yeah, it's a good one. So we'll have that on there too. So you guys can have that.
I'll put it on the downloads in the resource website. So if you guys go in there, we'll get that loaded.
See you all.
Thanks, Candace. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.